It was one of those damp Thursday evenings where the streetlights come on before you expect them and the air smells faintly of wet concrete and cold coffee. I was walking back to my car in the grocery store parking lot juggling a paper bag of small groceries, mostly milk, bread and a bag of rice, when a gust of wind picked up wrappers and leaves and flipped something small across my shoe. A rectangle of cardboard skidding until it bumped against my heel. I bent down automatically thinking it was a receipt, picked it up, and almost tossed it into the trash can by the cart corral until a detail caught my eye, the word Lotto, printed across the top and a row of numbers still crisp despite the creases. The date on the front was yesterday, the draw for last night, and as I stared at it a memory surfaced of the radio in my kitchen that morning announcing the winning numbers in the background of a traffic report. Without meaning to, I whispered those numbers under my breath like a superstition and then stared at the ticket. They matched. All 6. My heart thudded against the grocery bag. I looked around the lot expecting someone to shout, "That's mine!" But there were only cars glinting under the sodium lights and the flicker of a neon sign at the gas station across the street. No one paying attention. No one running toward me. The little rectangle sat in my palm like a secret. I slid it into my jacket pocket and felt its corners press against my ribs as I walked the rest of the way to my car, each step heavier and lighter at the same time. I drove home with the radio off, checking the ticket at every stoplight as if reality might shift between intersections. Same numbers, same impossible reality. My mind started its arithmetic automatically. My mortgage, my retirement account, my son's looming college tuition, my daughter's dental work, the roof that had leaked in last month's storm. Then another image rose uninvited. Mr. Keaton, my 74-year-old neighbor, bent over his roses clipping dead blooms, always buying tickets at the gas station, always saying, "Maybe this time, huh?" I remembered standing in line behind him 2 days ago as he played his usual numbers, the same numbers now staring back at me. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, 2 truths wrestling in my chest. This ticket could erase my worries and this ticket probably wasn't mine. I drove the whole way back with my fingers drumming on the steering wheel and the ticket's stiff corner pressing against my chest like a hidden bruise. The radio stayed off because any sound felt like a lie. The streetlights flickered on as I turned into our driveway and for a moment I just sat there with the engine running. I pulled the ticket out again and compared the numbers to my phone one more time. Still matched, still impossible. I switched off the ignition, picked up the grocery bag and walked into the house like a person trying to look casual carrying a bomb. Ellen was at the counter unloading mail. She asked if I remembered the coffee filters and I handed them to her with hands that didn't feel like mine. She looked at me closer, the way she used to look when the kids were little and one of them tried to hide a fever. "What's going on?" she asked, and I pulled the crumpled ticket from my jacket and set it on the table without a word. She read the numbers once and then again. The color drained from her face and she sat down hard. "That's Mr. Keaton's anniversary date," she whispered. "I've seen him play those numbers every week." My throat tightened. "If it's his," she said slowly, "he's going to be looking for it." I said he might not even know he lost it. People misplace receipts and hopes all the time. She stared at me for a long moment. "Do you want to be the kind of person who helps him misplace this one?" she asked quietly. I poured coffee I didn't need and muttered about our mortgage and our leaking roof and our son's tuition. "I'm tired too," she said, "but I don't want to be rich and wrong." Her words landed like a weight across my chest. We sealed the ticket in an envelope and slid it into the junk drawer under the rubber bands and old batteries, the place where things are kept safe by being unremarkable. We ate dinner without tasting it, tried to watch the news and failed, went to bed staring at the ceiling like it was a chalkboard with a problem we couldn't solve. Somewhere after midnight Ellen reached for my hand. "We could always share it," she whispered. "Give him a portion and keep some to fix our lives." I said that wasn't ownership and it wasn't peace. She rolled onto her back and stared at the dark. "Then what are we going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "But right now I can't breathe." Sleep came in thin strips like torn tissue paper, and when dawn finally arrived it felt like a verdict was due. Morning came gray and thin, the kind of light that makes everything look like it's holding its breath. I brewed coffee at 6 and stood at the back door, mug in my hand, staring at Mr. Keaton's yard. He was out there already in his wool sweater, clipping the dead heads off roses like a priest tending relics. I watched him a full minute before stepping outside. "Morning," I called. "Morning," he said without looking up. My voice felt too loud in the quiet. I asked if he was heading to the gas station later. "Already went," he said. "Had to pick up milk." I asked if he'd played his numbers. He gave a tired smile. "Always do," he said. "Heard there was a winner in the county, but it wasn't me." He patted one pocket, then the other, then his wallet, came up with a handful of receipts and a ticket from last week. "Must have tossed it," he said, laughing embarrassed. "Too many slips of paper for an old man." My stomach turned to acid. "Maybe check your car," I said. "Sometimes things slide under the mat." He nodded. "That's a good thought. Thanks." He shuffled toward his driveway with the careful haste of someone who doesn't want to hope in public. I stood at the fence alone, the steam from my coffee fading, hearing my mother's voice from decades ago telling me some choices build you and some choices break you, and you can tell which by how you breathe afterward. Inside, Ellen sat at the table with the envelope between her hands, her eyes on me before I spoke. "He doesn't have it, does he?" she asked. I shook my head. "Ask him what numbers he played," she said softly. "Let the truth put itself on the table." I went back out, my heart thudding like a slow drum. "Mr. Keaton," I called, "which sequence did you pick this week?" He smiled and recited them like a prayer he could say even with a mouth full of nails. Every number matched the ticket in my pocket. I walked back to our kitchen with the world clicking into a position I didn't like. I set the envelope on the table and stared at it. "We have our answer," Ellen said. "We have a problem," I replied. That night Ellen and I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope between us like it was a third person listening. We didn't open it, we didn't have to. The ticket's presence was a hum under our ribs. I laid out every argument as if putting silverware before a meal. "Possession is 9/10, I muttered. "Maybe it isn't his. Maybe fate is handing us a break." Ellen raised one eyebrow, the one that has ended better speeches than mine. "The law says finders have duties when the owner is known," she said quietly. "And our hearts say the same." We spent the next days circling the subject like a dog around a hot stove. Over breakfast I'd say, "What if we give him half?" Over lunch she'd say, "There's no fair half of someone else's property." At night in bed we'd lie awake staring at the ceiling and whispering our fears. She said she was afraid of being left out of the joy. I said I was afraid of losing the joy to obligation. Sometimes we laughed at our own contortions. Sometimes we didn't. I found myself watching Mr. Keaton through the window more than usual. How he always brought in our bins without being asked. How he bent to pick up litter at the curb. How he sat on his porch reading the paper with a photograph tucked inside, his wife Bonnie, the empty chair beside him like an outline. I noticed details I'd missed in 10 years of neighborliness. The careful way he watered his roses. The way he paused at the gate to greet every passerby even if they didn't respond. The quiet dignity of someone living on a fixed income without bitterness. I also noticed the ticket's weight in the drawer. Every time I opened it to grab a rubber band or a pen, the envelope would catch my eye, a stiff whisper under junk mail. I started to dream about it, a crumpled rectangle turning into a door I couldn't open, a stack of bills shrinking in my hands, Mr. Keaton waving from across an invisible fence point. One evening Ellen found me at the sink staring out the window at his porch. She dried her hands on a towel and said, "We're dragging our feet to see if keeping it will feel less like keeping. It won't." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Let's do the right thing before we talk ourselves into a cheaper version." I nodded but didn't move. "What if we return it, and he doesn't even say thank you?" I asked. "Then we'll sleep anyway," she said. "We'll breathe anyway." That night I lay awake thinking of my mother's voice telling me some choices build you and some break you, and you can tell which by how you breathe afterward. By morning I knew the conversation with Mr. Keaton couldn't be delayed. By Saturday morning the envelope in the junk drawer had turned into a heartbeat I could hear across the kitchen. Ellen poured 2 mugs of coffee and pushed one toward me without a word. "Today," she said softly, I nodded. I slipped the envelope into my jacket pocket and felt its edge press against my ribs like a verdict.mr. Keaton was on his porch reading a paper he wasn't seeing. His roses glistened from the overnight rain. I walked across the lawn with slow, deliberate steps. Art, I said, using his first name for the first time. He looked up, surprised. I think I found something of yours. He blinked at me. I held out the envelope. Please check before I say more. His hands shook as he slid the ticket out. He stared at the numbers, then at me, then back at the numbers. His breath caught. Where did you get this? He whispered. I told him about the grocery lot, about the wind, about picking it up without thinking. He closed his eyes and let out a sound between a prayer and a groan. I checked my car. I checked the kitchen. I thought I'd thrown it away. His voice trembled. These numbers are my anniversary, my wife's birthday, the day we moved into this house. I've played them for decades. He looked up at me, eyes bright and wet. Why didn't you just take it somewhere else? The question wasn't an accusation. It was a test of the world. Because I want to like breathing tomorrow, I said. He stared at me a long time, then folded the ticket carefully back into the envelope. I have to go to the lottery office, he said. He hesitated. Would you and Ellen come with me? I don't think I should ride in a car alone with this much electricity in my pocket. I said yes without thinking. Back at our house, Ellen was already by the door with her bag and a scarf, as if she'd been waiting for the knock in her chest too. We drove downtown with the radio off because any sound felt like a lie. Mr. Keaton sat in the back seat holding the envelope like it was made of glass. At the office a board security guard became less bored when he saw the numbers. A clerk became a supervisor, became a manager, became someone saying congratulations into a phone. Forms, questions, decisions about lump sum versus annuity, advice about lawyers and taxes blurred together. Through it all, Mr. Keaton kept glancing at us, as if to ensure he hadn't imagined us. When it was done, he folded a temporary certificate into his wallet like a fragile photograph. Can we go home now? He asked. We all need tea, I said. Back on his porch, mug steaming in our hands, the afternoon sun hung like a coin above the maple. Mr. Keaton cleared his throat and said, I have something to say and I need you to let me finish. We nodded. If you hadn't brought that ticket, he said slowly, I'd be standing at my sink calling myself a fool. I'd be spending this winter counting every dollar and every regret. His eyes flicked toward the empty lawn chair beside us. When Bonnie died, I thought the house would go quiet forever. But neighbors, he paused. Neighbors are a chorus if you leave a window open. You've done something that proves the world isn't upside down. He took a breath. I want to give you something. Not as payment but as a shape for gratitude. He named a sum that landed like a soft hammer in my chest, enough to fix the roof, breathe easier, pay off loans. Please let me do this so that I can sleep well too, he said. My first instinct was to refuse. We didn't do it for money, I started. Ellen touched my arm and shook her head gently. Mr. Keaton said, This is not payment. This is me choosing the kind of story I live in. I swallowed and said, We did what was right because we wanted to breathe. We'll accept because we want you to breathe too. He blinked fast. Bonnie would like you, he said. I think she already does, Ellen replied. For a while we just sat there listening to the fountain's trickle and the hum of distant traffic. The ticket was no longer between us. Trust was. Then Mr. Keaton said one more thing. I want you to help me decide how to use the rest. I don't trust people in suits as much as I trust neighbors with shovels. I said yes. In that moment I realized the real gift wasn't money. It was being invited into someone's life where trust is the currency. Within weeks the story of the lost ticket was no longer just a rumor. It was a neighborhood legend. People we barely knew began waving with both hands. The mail carrier stopped on the porch to tell us she'd heard what happened. Some came up the steps shyly with cookies or pies, as if gratitude were contagious. A few even asked jokingly if we were kicking ourselves for not keeping the ticket, and then watched our faces for a flicker of regret. Ellen handled those with grace. We sleep like people who did what they can live with, she said, and the conversation shifted to something kinder. Mr. Keaton asked us to come by in the evenings to help him plan what to do with the money beyond his own needs. In his kitchen over mugs of tea he talked about Bonnie's old dream of funding a scholarship for students who reminded her of herself. Kids who worked part-time to help their families, who hadn't traveled far but dreamed far. We sketched ideas on yellow pads, making lists, arguing over details, laughing at the absurdity of two ordinary neighbors designing a legacy. Meanwhile, his garden began to change. He hired a local landscaper to build benches, and neighbors volunteered to plant zinnias and herbs. On Saturdays, children wandered over to help water. One afternoon, Ben, the teenager with the skateboard, built a small trellis with Mr. Keaton's guidance. The fountain he installed in the middle whispered like a soft conversation. A new plaque on the first bench read, "Bonnie Keaton loved this view." Ellen and I started to notice small changes in ourselves too. We stopped hiding behind polite waves. We lingered to talk with Mrs. Henderson about her granddaughter's college applications. We invited Mr. Lee over for coffee. Our own kitchen, once silent, became a place where people came for advice or a slice of bread. The money Mr. Keaton gave us fixed the roof and cleared our oldest debts, but the real change wasn't in our bank account. It was in the way the block began to feel like a long table instead of a row of locked doors. By early summer, the scholarship was no longer just an idea on yellow paper. It had a name, a small endowment, and a date for its first award. Mr. Keaton asked the high school principal if the auditorium could host a neighborhood gathering. The principal said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. We spent evenings printing simple invitations and delivering them door to door, Ellen with her steady handwriting, me with my folded maps of where to go next. On the evening of the ceremony, the air was warm and smelled faintly of cut grass. The auditorium filled with neighbors who had never been inside the school before. Mr. Keaton stood at the front in his best suit, Bonnie's favorite scarf folded in his breast pocket. He spoke not like a man giving money but like a man giving thanks. "Sometimes," he said into the microphone, "a good thing lands in the wrong hands and the right hands bring it home. This scholarship is for the student who has learned that help is a form of courage and giving is a form of wisdom." A girl in the third row with a track jacket and tired eyes stood when they called her name. She walked to the stage and shook his hand, and her hand shook less afterward. In the lobby afterwards, people ate pie first from paper plates, and scribbled notes, for her. Mr. Keaton looked like a man who had found a second anniversary for his marriage. On the way out, a neighbor I had never spoken to stopped me and asked if I ever thought about what would have happened if I had kept the ticket. "Every night for a week," I said. "And then less and less." She asked if I regretted it. "Not in any currency I value," I said. That night at our window the street looked both the same and kinder. The roof over our heads no longer leaked. Our son texted a screenshot of his tuition account with a zero balance. Our daughter sent a selfie grinning with new braces we could now cover. Ellen and I sat on the porch steps watching the sun drop behind Mr. Keaton's maple and the fountain whisper to itself. I thought about the day in the parking lot, the gust of wind, and the way a rectangle of cardboard became a compass. The moral dilemma had been real and noisy and full of teeth, but the answer, once chosen, had become quiet and warm and wide. Before we went inside, I asked Ellen the question I knew our story would end on. "What would you have done if I hadn't told you?" She looked at me for a long moment. "I married you because I knew you would," she said. We turned off the lights and the house felt honest. So I'll leave you with this. When life slides a choice across your shoe and the numbers look like rescue, which story do you want to tell about yourself 1 year from now, 5 years from now, when a neighbor waves and the roses are in bloom, the one where your breath got heavier, or the one where it got free?